If this story resonates with you, like the video and subscribe to Rise and Shine for more stories that challenge the way you think. Let's begin. An adult once told you that life is simple. Wake up early, go to school, get good grades, find a stable job, work hard, save money, retire one day. They said it with confidence, as if this formula had been tested and proven beyond doubt, as if it were a universal law of success. You believed them because everyone around you repeated the same story. Teachers, parents, friends, society itself. But what no one ever told you is that this story was already outdated the moment you heard it. From a very young age, you are trained to follow instructions. Sit still, be quiet, do not question too much, memorize what is written on the board, repeat it during the exam, forget it afterward. This is not education in the true sense. This is conditioning. You are being prepared for a world where obedience is rewarded and curiosity is often punished. A world where fitting in is safer than standing out. School teaches you how to be a good employee, not how to be a free individual. It teaches you how to meet expectations, not how to create value. You learn how to solve predefined problems, but not how to ask meaningful questions. And the most important question of all is never addressed. How does money actually work? You are told that money is something you earn by working harder, that saving is the ultimate virtue, that debt is dangerous, that risk is irresponsible. These ideas sound logical, even moral. They are repeated so often that they become part of your identity. You grow up believing that struggling financially is a sign of laziness or lack of discipline. You believe that if you are not doing well, something must be wrong with you. But what if the problem is not you? What if the rules you were taught were designed for a different world, a world that no longer exists? There was a time when working hard at a single job could actually make you wealthy, when loyalty to a company was rewarded with stability, when saving money meant preserving value. That time has passed. The world has changed, but the advice has not. And outdated advice produces outdated results. Most people spend their lives chasing a paycheck, believing that it represents safety. They feel relief when the salary hits their bank account. For a brief moment, anxiety fades. Bills can be paid. Food can be bought. Life continues. But that relief is temporary, because the paycheck creates dependence. The moment you need it to survive, it owns you. When your survival depends on a monthly payment, your choices shrink. You tolerate work you dislike. You stay silent when you should speak up. You avoid risks even when opportunities appear. Fear becomes a constant companion. Fear of losing your job, fear of disappointing others, fear of stepping outside the familiar path. This fear is not accidental. It is the result of a mindset that has been carefully installed over years, a mindset that equates safety with obedience and danger with independence, a mindset that tells you it is better to be comfortable than capable. Inside every person, there are multiple voices competing for control. One voice wants comfort. It seeks routine, predictability, and approval. Another voice wants growth. It is curious, restless, and often uncomfortable. And there is a third voice, quieter but more powerful, that wants freedom, real freedom, the kind that does not depend on permission or approval. Most people are taught to listen only to the voice of comfort. That voice says, be realistic, don't take unnecessary risks. At least you have a job. Over time, this voice grows stronger, while the others fade into the background. Dreams become hobbies, ambitions become regrets. Freedom, however, does not come from comfort. It comes from competence, from understanding how systems work, from learning skills that are not tied to a single employer, from seeing the world as it is, not as you were told it should be. Money is not just paper or numbers on a screen. It is a system of rules, incentives, and behaviors. Those who understand the system can navigate it. Those who do not are controlled by it. School rarely teaches you these rules because the system does not need millions of financially independent thinkers. It needs workers, consumers, taxpayers. This does not mean the system is evil. It means it serves a purpose, and that purpose is not your personal freedom. If you want freedom, you must take responsibility for your own education. There is a fundamental difference between working for money and having money work for you. When you work for money, your time is exchanged for income. There is a limit to how much you can earn because there is a limit to your time and energy. When money works for you, systems generate income whether you are present or not. This difference changes everything. But understanding this difference requires a shift in thinking. It requires letting go of the belief that effort alone creates wealth. Effort is important, but direction matters more. You can work incredibly hard climbing the wrong ladder and still end up nowhere. Many people confuse being busy with being productive. They fill their days with tasks, meetings, and obligations, yet make little progress toward freedom. They are exhausted but not fulfilled, active but not advancing. This is not because they lack intelligence. It is because they are playing a game they do not understand. Every game has rules. If you do not know the rules, you cannot win consistently. You may get lucky once or twice, but luck is not a strategy. Financial freedom is not about secret tricks or shortcuts. It is about seeing patterns, understanding leverage, and making decisions based on long-term outcomes rather than short-term comfort. Failure plays a critical role in this process. In the traditional mindset, failure is something to be avoided at all costs. It is seen as shameful, embarrassing, proof that you are not good enough. But in reality, failure is feedback. It shows you what does not work. It forces you to adapt. It builds resilience. Those who rely on a paycheck often fear failure more than they desire success, because failure threatens their sense of security. Those who pursue independence understand that failure is part of the journey. They expect it, they plan for it, they grow through it. There is a moment in every person's life when comfort and growth demand different choices. Comfort says, stay. Growth says, go. One leads to familiarity, the other leads to uncertainty. Most people choose familiarity, not because it is better, but because it feels safer. Yet safety without growth slowly turns into stagnation. The irony is that the skills required to survive without a paycheck often make you far more valuable than any single job ever could. When you learn how to create value, solve real problems, and adapt to change, you become anti-fragile. You do not fear economic shifts because you understand how to respond to them. Wealth is not just about money. It is about options. The option to walk away, the option to say no, the option to choose how you spend your time. These options are invisible to those trapped in routine, but once you see them, you cannot unsee them. Many people wait for permission to change their lives, permission from their parents, from society, from circumstances. That permission never comes, because no one benefits from you becoming independent except you. The uncomfortable truth is that no one is coming to save you. No institution will suddenly teach you what you need to know. No job will magically transform into freedom. If you want a different outcome, you must adopt a different mindset. This begins with questioning assumptions you have never questioned before. Why is a stable job considered success? Why is debt always labeled bad without context? Why is risk portrayed as reckless instead of necessary? These questions do not make you rebellious. They make you conscious. Awareness is the first step. Once you see the gap between what you were taught and how the world actually works, you face a choice. You can ignore it and return to comfort, or you can explore it and accept discomfort. Growth lives in that discomfort. Most people are not poor because they lack money. They are poor because they lack understanding. They make decisions based on fear instead of strategy. They focus on short-term relief instead of long-term leverage. They trade time for money without realizing that time is the only resource they can never replace. The world rewards those who think differently, not immediately and not without resistance, but eventually. Every major shift in history was led by people who questioned the accepted narrative, people who were willing to look foolish before they looked successful. You do not need to reject everything you were taught. Discipline matters, effort matters, persistence matters. But without financial intelligence, these traits are often used to build someone else's dream instead of your own. At some point, you must decide whether you want to be managed or self-directed, Whether you want predictable days or meaningful progress, whether you want comfort now or freedom later, there is no universally right answer, but there is an honest one. Freedom demands responsibility. It demands learning things that are not handed to you. It demands making mistakes without guarantees. It demands patience when results are slow and courage when doubt is loud. Most people never start this journey because it threatens their identity. They have spent years defining themselves by their job titles, salaries, and social approval. Letting go of that identity feels like losing themselves, but in reality, it is how they finally find themselves. This is not a call to quit your job tomorrow or reject society. It is a call to wake up, to realize that the path you are on was chosen for you long before you understood the consequences, and that you still have time to choose differently. The world will not slow down for you. Information will continue to multiply. Systems will continue to evolve. Those who adapt will thrive. Those who cling to outdated beliefs will struggle and wonder why. Everything begins with how you think. Your results are a reflection of your mindset. Change the way you see money, work, and risk, and your decisions will change. Change your decisions, and your life will follow. This is where the journey truly starts. Not with answers, but with better questions. Not with certainty, but with awareness. And not with comfort, but with the courage to step into the unknown, knowing that growth waits on the other side. Once you begin questioning the path you were given, something uncomfortable happens. The world stops feeling solid. The rules you trusted no longer seem universal. Advice that once sounded wise starts to feel shallow. This moment can be unsettling because certainty is comforting even when it is wrong. Doubt, on the other hand, demands effort, but doubt is also the doorway to clarity. Most people avoid this stage. They sense the cracks in the story they were told, but instead of exploring them, they distract themselves. More work, more entertainment, more noise. Anything to avoid sitting alone with uncomfortable questions, because those questions have consequences. Once you see the system clearly, you can no longer pretend you are trapped by accident. Responsibility quietly shifts back to you. The system does not force you to stay ignorant. It simply rewards you for not questioning it. Follow the rules and you will be tolerated. Break them thoughtfully and you will be resisted. This resistance is often subtle. It comes in the form of raised eyebrows, warnings disguised as concern, and phrases like, "Be realistic," or "Don't risk too much." These voices usually come from people who care about you, but they are also speaking from their own fears. Fear is contagious. It spreads through families, communities, and generations. Parents pass it to children without realizing it, not because they want to limit them, but because they want to protect them. The tragedy is that protection often looks like limitation. Safety becomes the highest value, even when it quietly suffocates growth. Financial fear is one of the strongest forms of fear. It touches survival, status, and identity all at once. Losing money feels like losing control. Losing control feels like losing yourself. That is why so many people cling to familiar routines, even when those routines slowly drain their energy and joy. To move beyond this fear, you must understand how deeply it is wired into human behavior. Your brain evolved to keep you alive, not to make you wealthy or free. It prioritizes certainty over opportunity, familiar pain over unfamiliar possibility. This is why change feels dangerous, even when staying the same is far more harmful in the long run. When you rely on a paycheck, your nervous system is constantly negotiating with uncertainty. Even if your job feels stable, part of you knows it could disappear. Companies restructure, markets shift, technologies replace roles. None of this is personal, yet it feels deeply personal when it happens to you. So you adapt by lowering your expectations. You tell yourself that wanting more is selfish or unrealistic. But there is a quiet cost to this adaptation. You trade ambition for approval, curiosity for compliance. Over time, you forget what you actually want. You become very good at doing what is expected and very bad at imagining alternatives. True financial education begins when you stop asking how to earn more and start asking how value is created. Money flows toward value, not effort. This is one of the most misunderstood truths in modern society. People are taught to measure worth by how hard they work, not by the problems they solve. But the market does not reward sweat, it rewards impact. A person who solves a small problem for one person is paid little. A person who solves a large problem for many people is paid more. A person who creates a system that solves problems without their constant involvement gains leverage. Leverage is the multiplier that separates effort from outcome. Leverage can take many forms. It can be technology, capital, media, or systems. The key is that leverage allows results to scale without requiring proportional increases in time and energy. Most traditional jobs offer very little leverage. You are paid for presence, not for outcome. When you stop showing up, the income stops. This structure conditions you to associate value with time spent rather than results produced. It makes you busy but not necessarily effective. It keeps you focused on hours instead of systems, and it limits your ability to grow beyond a certain point. Those who escape this trap do not do so by working harder. They work differently. They study patterns. They observe incentives. They pay attention to where money moves and why. They understand that money is a reflection of human behavior, fear, desire, and belief. Belief plays a powerful role here. If you believe money is scarce, you will act defensively. You will hoard, avoid risk, and miss opportunities. If you believe money is abundant but unevenly distributed, you will look for ways to position yourself closer to the flow. Neither belief guarantees success, but one opens doors while the other closes them. Scarcity thinking is reinforced by constant comparison. Social media shows curated success without context. You see outcomes without seeing process. This creates either envy or resignation. You either feel behind or you convince yourself that success is reserved for others. Both reactions keep you passive. Passivity is comfortable. It requires no responsibility. If the system is rigged, then your lack of progress is not your fault. There is emotional relief in that narrative. But there is also stagnation. Empowerment begins when you accept that while you did not design the system, you are still responsible for how you navigate it. This responsibility does not mean blaming yourself for everything. It means recognizing your agency. It means understanding that learning is no longer confined to classrooms. Information is everywhere. Skills are accessible. The barrier is not access, but willingness. Learning how money works requires unlearning first. You must unlearn the idea that debt is always bad. Debt is a tool. Used poorly, it destroys. Used strategically, it accelerates growth. You must unlearn the belief that stability equals safety. Stability often creates fragility because it discourages adaptability. You must also unlearn the belief that you need permission to start. Many people wait until they feel ready. They wait for confidence. Confidence rarely comes first. Action creates confidence, not the other way around. Those who build independence often start clumsily. They make mistakes, they misjudge opportunities, they experience losses, but each mistake teaches them something no textbook ever could. They gain real-world feedback, they develop judgment. Judgment is more valuable than information. Information is abundant. Judgment is rare. It is built through experience, reflection, and correction. This is why those who avoid failure also avoid mastery. The difference between those who stay stuck and those who progress is not intelligence. It is tolerance for discomfort. Growth demands discomfort. Learning demands admitting ignorance. Independence demands uncertainty. There is no path around this, only through it. Many people say they want freedom, but what they really want is comfort without constraint. They want the benefits of independence without the responsibility. This contradiction creates frustration. Freedom is not the absence of structure. It is the ability to choose your structure. When you depend entirely on a job, your structure is chosen for you. Your schedule, your priorities, your income ceiling. When you build your own systems, structure becomes intentional. You decide where to focus, when to rest, and how to allocate resources. This shift does not happen overnight. It begins with small changes in how you think and act. You start paying attention to expenses, not just as costs, but as reflections of values. You notice how often decisions are driven by fear rather than strategy. You begin to see time as an asset, not just something to fill. Time is the only currency that truly matters. Money can be earned again, time cannot. Every hour spent building skills, systems, or understanding compounds. Every hour spent avoiding discomfort decays. The most dangerous phrase in this journey is, "I'll do it later." Later is where dreams go to quietly die. Not because later never comes, but because when it does, the same fears are still there. Waiting does not remove fear, it strengthens it. Momentum is your ally. Even small actions taken consistently reshape identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who wishes and start seeing yourself as someone who experiments. This identity shift is subtle but powerful. It changes how you respond to challenges. Challenges stop feeling like personal failures and start feeling like puzzles. Problems become information. Setbacks become adjustments. This mindset does not eliminate stress, but it transforms it into something useful. There will be moments when the old voice of comfort returns. It will remind you how easy it would be to stop, to go back, to accept what is familiar. This voice never disappears entirely. But you can choose not to obey it. Progress requires discernment. Not every opportunity is worth pursuing. Not every risk is intelligent. Discernment comes from understanding your goals and aligning actions accordingly. Chasing everything leads nowhere. Focus creates leverage. As you continue this path, you will notice a growing gap between you and those who remain fully committed to the old narrative. Conversations may feel different. Priorities may diverge. This can feel lonely, but it is also a sign of growth. You are not becoming better than others. You are becoming more aligned with yourself. Alignment creates clarity. Clarity creates calm, and calm allows you to make better decisions under pressure. The world rewards those who can think clearly when others panic. Economic shifts, technological change, and uncertainty are not threats to those who understand systems. They are opportunities, not because they are easy, but because most people freeze. This journey is not about rejecting society. It is about engaging with it consciously. It is about choosing participation over submission, understanding over ignorance, strategy over habit. You were never meant to live on autopilot. You were meant to observe, adapt, and create. The moment you accept this, the story you inherited loses its grip on you. You may not have all the answers yet. That is fine. Clarity comes through movement, not stillness. What matters is that you no longer confuse comfort with safety or obedience with wisdom. This is the stage where awareness turns into intention, where questioning turns into learning, where learning prepares you for action. The next step will demand more from you, not just mentally, but emotionally. Because understanding the game is only the beginning. Playing it requires courage. At some point, awareness stops being enough. You can understand the system, recognize the flaws in the old narrative, and still remain exactly where you are. Insight without action becomes another form of comfort. It feels productive, but it changes nothing. This is the moment where many people get stuck. They know more than before, yet their lives look the same. The gap between understanding and execution becomes painfully clear. This gap exists because action carries risk, and risk threatens identity. As long as ideas remain theoretical, you can imagine success without confronting failure. The moment you act, outcomes become real. You are no longer protected by potential. You are exposed to results. For many, this exposure feels unbearable, so they delay. They prepare endlessly. They research, plan, and refine, convincing themselves they are being responsible. In reality, they are avoiding uncertainty. Uncertainty is not the enemy. Dependency is. When your survival depends on external approval, whether from an employer, an institution, or even your social circle, your decisions are filtered through fear. You do not ask what is optimal. You ask what is acceptable. This subtle shift shapes your entire life. Breaking this dependency does not require reckless behavior. It requires intentional experimentation. Small actions taken with awareness and reflection. testing assumptions instead of protecting them. You learn far more from a modest attempt that fails than from a perfect plan that never leaves your head. Execution changes your relationship with fear. Fear thrives in imagination. It grows in the absence of feedback. When you act, fear is forced to confront reality. Often, reality is far less dramatic than what fear predicted. Even when outcomes are negative, they are usually survivable. This realization weakens fear's grip. The first steps toward independence rarely feel empowering. They often feel awkward, inefficient, and discouraging. You may realize how little you know. You may make mistakes that feel obvious in hindsight. This phase humbles you. It strips away ego and replaces it with curiosity, if you allow it. Ego is one of the biggest obstacles to progress. It wants to protect your self-image. It resists being seen as inexperienced or wrong. But growth demands humility, the willingness to be a beginner again, the willingness to look foolish temporarily in exchange for long-term capability. Most people are trained to avoid this state. School rewards correct answers, not thoughtful mistakes. Work environments often punish failure rather than analyzing it. As a result, many adults equate mistakes with incompetence. They internalize failure as identity instead of treating it as information. Those who build autonomy learn to separate who they are from what they do. A failed attempt does not make them a failure. A wrong decision does not define their worth. This separation creates emotional resilience. It allows them to take calculated risks without collapsing under pressure. Risk itself is widely misunderstood. It is often framed as something to eliminate, but eliminating risk entirely is impossible. What you can do is choose which risks to take. There is the risk of trying and failing, and there is the risk of never trying and slowly decaying. One is visible and uncomfortable, the other is invisible and familiar. The danger of the second risk is that it rarely announces itself. Years pass quietly. You stay busy, you meet expectations. On the surface, life looks fine, but internally, dissatisfaction grows. Regret accumulates slowly, then all at once. This is why so many people experience crises later in life, not because they suddenly failed, but because they avoided failure for too long. Action forces clarity. When you engage with reality, vague ideas become concrete. You learn what matters and what does not. You discover your strengths and limitations. This information is priceless. It cannot be gained through observation alone. One of the most important shifts during this stage is moving from consumption to creation. Consumption feels safe. You watch, listen, read, and absorb. Creation exposes you. You produce something. You offer value. You invite feedback. This transition is uncomfortable because it reveals where you stand. But creation is where leverage begins. Even small acts of creation change your position in the system. You are no longer just a participant, you are a contributor. This shift alters how you see opportunities. You stop asking what you can get and start asking what you can build. Building does not always mean starting a business. It can mean developing a skill, assembling a system, or improving a process. What matters is ownership. When you own the outcome, you learn faster. You care more. You adapt better. Ownership also changes how you experience time. When you work only for immediate compensation, time feels scarce. Every hour has a price tag. When you work on something that compounds, time becomes an ally. Efforts made today can pay dividends later. This perspective reduces anxiety and increases patience. Patience is not passive waiting. It is active consistency. It is showing up repeatedly, even when progress is not immediately visible. Most meaningful outcomes require delayed gratification. This is difficult in a world optimized for instant feedback. Notifications, likes, and short-term rewards train your brain to expect quick validation. Breaking this conditioning requires conscious effort. You must learn to value depth over speed, process over applause, quiet progress over visible approval. This is challenging because social reinforcement is powerful, but independence often requires moving without applause. There will be moments when you question your path, when effort does not seem to translate into results, when others appear to advance faster with less effort. Comparison intensifies doubt. In these moments, it is tempting to abandon your direction and chase what looks easier. This is where clarity of purpose matters. If your actions are aligned with your values, temporary setbacks do not derail you. If they are not, discomfort becomes unbearable. Purpose acts as an internal compass. It does not eliminate uncertainty, but it provides direction. Purpose does not have to be grand or dramatic. It can be as simple as wanting control over your time, or wanting to create something meaningful, or wanting to avoid repeating patterns you have observed in others. What matters is that it is authentic. Authenticity strengthens resilience. When your motivation comes from within, external opinions lose power. You still listen, but you do not obey blindly. You evaluate advice based on alignment, not authority. As you continue acting, you will notice that confidence grows quietly. Not the loud, performative confidence often celebrated online, but a grounded sense of capability. You trust yourself to figure things out. You are less threatened by uncertainty because you have evidence that you can adapt. This confidence is earned, not imagined. It comes from doing hard things and surviving them, from making decisions and adjusting course, from realizing that you are more capable than you were taught to believe. One of the most liberating realizations during this phase is that no one actually knows what they are doing as much as they pretend to. Many systems run on assumptions, habits, and momentum. Authority often rests on confidence, not certainty. This does not mean expertise is irrelevant. It means that you do not need to wait until you feel perfect to participate. Participation accelerates learning. You learn faster inside the game than watching from the sidelines. You gain context. You see second-order effects. You understand trade-offs. This understanding cannot be simulated. As your competence grows, so does your responsibility. You can no longer blame ignorance. You begin to see consequences more clearly. Decisions carry weight. This responsibility can feel heavy, but it is also empowering. It means your actions matter. Many people retreat at this stage because responsibility feels burdensome. It is easier to complain than to create, easier to criticize than to build. But responsibility is the price of freedom. Without it, freedom becomes chaos. Structure becomes important here. Not imposed structure, but chosen structure. Routines, systems, and boundaries that support your goals. Discipline is no longer something forced upon you. It becomes a tool you use deliberately. This discipline is flexible, not rigid. It adapts as you learn. It prioritizes effectiveness over perfection. It allows for rest without guilt and effort without resentment. As you move forward, you may find that your definition of success begins to change. It becomes less about external markers and more about internal alignment. Less about comparison and more about progress. Less about proving and more about building. This shift is subtle but profound. It reduces anxiety. It increases satisfaction. You stop chasing validation and start valuing competence. You measure success by how well your life reflects your intentions. There will still be fear. Fear does not disappear. It evolves. Instead of fearing failure, you may fear stagnation. Instead of fearing judgment, you may fear wasting potential. These fears are more constructive. They push you forward instead of holding you back. Momentum builds gradually. Small wins accumulate. Patterns emerge. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once felt impossible becomes routine. This is the compounding effect of consistent action. At this stage, you are no longer just questioning the old narrative. You are actively replacing it. You are building a personal framework based on experience rather than instruction. This framework is not static, it evolves as you do. You begin to understand that freedom is not a destination. It is a practice, a continuous process of learning, adjusting, and choosing consciously. There is no final state where everything is solved. There is only increasing alignment. This realization removes pressure. You do not need to arrive. You need to engage. You need to stay awake, to remain curious, to continue acting even when clarity is incomplete. Because clarity often follows action, not the other way around. and those who wait to feel ready often wait forever. You are not behind, you are not late, you are exactly where your choices have led you. And from this point forward, different choices lead to different outcomes. The path ahead will demand more honesty, more courage, more responsibility, but it will also offer something the old path never could: agency. And once you taste agency, going back to autopilot becomes impossible. As your sense of agency strengthens, something subtle but important begins to shift. You stop seeing the world as something that happens to you and start seeing it as something you interact with. Events no longer feel random or purely external. You notice patterns, you notice cause and effect. You begin to understand that outcomes are rarely accidents. They are usually the delayed results of decisions made long before. This stage can feel disorienting. With agency comes accountability. You can no longer fully blame circumstances, people, or systems for where you are. You may still acknowledge their influence, but you also recognize your role within them. This realization is empowering, but it is also heavy, because once you see your influence, you also see your missed opportunities. Many people experience a quiet grief here. Grief for time wasted, for chances not taken, for paths avoided out of fear. This grief is natural. It is part of waking up. What matters is how you respond to it. You can turn it inward as regret, or you can transform it into resolve. Resolve is different from motivation. Motivation is emotional and unstable. It comes and goes. Resolve is calm and persistent. It does not require excitement. It requires commitment. Commitment to showing up even when enthusiasm fades. Especially when enthusiasm fades. At this point, discipline becomes central. Not discipline imposed by external authority, but self-discipline rooted in intention. This kind of discipline is not about punishment or deprivation. It is about alignment, choosing actions that support the life you are building, even when easier alternatives exist. The misconception is that discipline restricts freedom. In reality, discipline creates freedom. Without it, your impulses control you. Your attention is scattered. Your energy is wasted. You react instead of choosing. Discipline gathers your resources and directs them. Attention is one of those resources. In a world designed to distract you, attention has become a battleground. Algorithms compete for it. Advertisers monetize it. Noise overwhelms it. If you do not consciously protect your attention, it will be consumed by things that offer little in return. Protecting attention does not mean withdrawing from the world. It means choosing what you engage with deliberately, asking whether something informs, distracts, or drains you, learning to say no without guilt, understanding that every yes has an opportunity cost. As you become more selective, you may notice discomfort, boredom, restlessness. Silence can feel unsettling when you are accustomed to constant stimulation, but boredom is not an enemy, it is a signal. It creates space for deeper thought, for integration, for insight. Insight often emerges when you stop filling every moment, when you allow your mind to wander without direction. This is where connections form, where ideas synthesize, where intuition sharpens. These moments are rare for those who live in constant reaction mode. Intuition is another misunderstood concept. It is not mystical or irrational. It is pattern recognition built through experience. When you engage deeply with your work, your decisions, and your environment, your intuition improves. You begin to sense when something is off, when timing is wrong, when an opportunity is misaligned. Listening to intuition requires trust. Trust in your judgment. Trust that you can recover if you misstep. This trust does not come from optimism. It comes from evidence, from having navigated challenges before and learned from them. As your trust grows, so does your willingness to make longer-term decisions. You stop optimizing solely for immediate comfort or reward. You think in years instead of weeks. You ask where this path leads, not just how it feels today. Long-term thinking is rare because it demands patience and imagination. It also requires resisting social pressure. Many people live according to short-term incentives. praise, approval, quick wins. Choosing a longer horizon often means delayed recognition. Delayed recognition can feel lonely. You may be building quietly while others celebrate visible milestones. This can trigger doubt, but visibility is not the same as progress. Many visible successes are fragile. They rely on constant reinforcement. Quiet progress tends to be more durable. Durability matters. Systems built slowly with intention withstand stress better than those built quickly for attention. This applies to careers, finances, relationships, and personal habits. When stress arrives, fragile structures collapse. Durable ones adapt. Stress is inevitable. The question is not whether you will face it, but how prepared you are. Preparation does not eliminate stress, but it reduces panic. When you have multiple options, stress becomes a challenge rather than a threat. Options are the true measure of wealth. Not just financial options, but cognitive and emotional ones. The option to pause, the option to pivot, the option to say no. These options are created over time through learning, saving, building, and restraint. Restraint is often overlooked. In a culture that celebrates excess, restraint seems boring, but restraint preserves energy. It prevents you from chasing every opportunity and burning out. It allows you to choose selectively rather than reactively. As you practice restraint, you may feel out of sync with those around you. Conversations centered on consumption or status may lose their appeal. This does not mean you judge others. It means your priorities are changing. Changing priorities can strain relationships. Not all connections evolve at the same pace. Some are based on shared habits rather than shared values. When habits change, tension arises. This is not a failure. It is a natural consequence of growth. Navigating this tension requires empathy and boundaries. Empathy to understand that others may feel threatened or confused. Boundaries to protect your direction. You do not need to convince anyone of your choices. Consistency speaks louder than explanation. Consistency is powerful because it compounds invisibly. Small actions repeated daily shape identity. You become what you repeatedly do, not what you intend, not what you talk about, what you do. This realization shifts focus from goals to systems. Goals provide direction, but systems create progress. A goal without a system is a wish. A system without a goal is wandering. Balance is essential. Systems reduce reliance on willpower. They make desired actions easier and undesired actions harder. They automate discipline. This frees mental energy for creativity and problem solving. As your systems improve, life feels less chaotic, not because problems disappear, but because you respond more effectively. You stop being overwhelmed by every challenge. You triage, you prioritize, you act. Action reinforces agency. Agency reinforces confidence. Confidence reinforces action. This feedback loop accelerates growth. You begin to trust your ability to navigate uncertainty. This trust is quiet but steady. One of the most profound changes at this stage is how you relate to failure. Failure becomes less personal, less dramatic. It is no longer a verdict on your worth. It is a signal, a data point, something to be examined, not feared. This perspective allows you to take calculated risks repeatedly. Not reckless leaps, but thoughtful experiments. Each experiment teaches you something. Even when outcomes disappoint, learning accumulates. Accumulated learning is leverage. It allows you to make better decisions with less effort. Patterns become familiar. Mistakes become less costly. Success becomes more predictable. Predictability does not mean certainty. It means increased odds. You understand probabilities better. You plan for downside. You build buffers. This reduces anxiety and increases resilience. Resilience is not toughness. It is flexibility. The ability to bend without breaking, to adjust without losing direction, to recover without resentment. As resilience grows, fear changes shape. It becomes less about survival and more about meaning. You may begin to ask deeper questions. Not just how to succeed, but why. Not just what you want to build, but what kind of person you want to become. These questions signal maturation. Success without meaning feels hollow. Many people reach external milestones only to feel empty. They followed the rules, achieved the markers, and still felt dissatisfied. Meaning cannot be borrowed, it must be constructed. Meaning emerges from contribution, growth, and alignment. From using your abilities in service of something beyond immediate gratification. This does not require grand missions. It requires sincerity. Sincerity anchors you when outcomes fluctuate. When results lag, sincerity keeps you engaged. When success arrives, sincerity keeps you grounded. It prevents arrogance and despair alike. At this stage, you may notice a quieter form of confidence. You no longer need to prove yourself constantly. You are comfortable saying, "I don't know," because you trust your ability to learn. You are comfortable being patient because you trust your process. This confidence is rare and valuable. It is not loud. It does not seek validation. It simply acts. You begin to see that the old narrative was not entirely wrong. Discipline, effort, and persistence still matter, but they must be directed. Without direction, they reinforce stagnation. With direction, they create momentum. The difference is subtle but decisive. One path keeps you busy. The other moves you forward. As you look ahead, the question shifts again. It is no longer, "Can I do this?" but "Am I willing to sustain this?" Because sustainability is the real test. Anyone can act briefly. Few can act consistently. Consistency requires honesty with yourself, with your limits, with your motivations. It requires adjusting pace without abandoning direction. It requires rest without retreat. This balance is learned, not taught, and you are learning it now. The journey is no longer about escape. It is about construction, building a life that reflects your values rather than reacting to external pressure. This work is slower than chasing quick wins, but it is far more enduring. You are not finished. You are not supposed to be. Growth does not end. But you are no longer asleep. And once awake, every choice carries weight. There comes a moment when the noise fades, not because the world becomes quieter, but because you no longer let every sound dictate your direction. The urgency that once controlled you begins to loosen its grip. You still care, you still act, but you are no longer reactive. This is the quiet arrival of integration, when everything you have learned starts to settle into how you live rather than what you think about. At this stage, the biggest challenge is not ignorance or fear. It is drift. Drift happens when progress becomes subtle and the absence of crisis creates the illusion that effort is no longer necessary. Things are working. Life feels manageable. And slowly, without intention, you begin to coast. This is not failure. It is human nature, but it is also where many journeys quietly stall. Growth does not announce when it needs maintenance. It simply decays when neglected. Skills dull. Systems weaken. Discipline softens. Not dramatically, but gradually. The danger here is comfort disguised as stability. The same comfort that once kept you stuck can return in a more refined form. To move forward, you must recognize that freedom is not a state you reach and keep forever. It is something you practice. Like physical health, it requires ongoing attention. There is no finish line where effort ends and reward becomes permanent. There is only alignment maintained through conscious choice. At this point, you begin to understand that mastery is less about intensity and more about rhythm. Bursts of extreme effort followed by collapse do not create sustainable progress. What matters is pace. A pace you can maintain when motivation is low, when inspiration is absent, when results are delayed. This is where many people misunderstand discipline. They believe it means forcing yourself through resistance every day. In reality, effective discipline often looks quiet. It is the removal of friction, the design of environments that support your intentions, the reduction of unnecessary decisions. You stop asking yourself whether you feel like doing the work. You simply do it because it is who you are now. Identity replaces motivation. This shift is profound. When action aligns with identity, effort feels lighter, even when the work is hard. Identity is shaped by evidence. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, no matter how small, you reinforce trust. Every time you break one, trust erodes. Over time, this trust determines your confidence far more than external validation ever could. This internal trust allows you to navigate uncertainty with calm. You no longer panic when plans change. You adjust. You no longer interpret obstacles as signs to quit. You treat them as signals to adapt. This does not make life easy, but it makes it manageable. As your inner stability grows, your relationship with success changes. Success stops being something you chase and becomes something you allow. You stop forcing outcomes and start focusing on inputs. You care less about recognition and more about coherence between what you believe and how you act. This coherence is rare. Many people live fragmented lives. Their values conflict with their behavior. Their goals conflict with their habits. This internal friction creates constant stress. When coherence increases, stress decreases, even if external challenges remain. You begin to notice that peace does not come from control over circumstances, but from confidence in your response. The world remains unpredictable. Markets shift. Relationships change. Unexpected events occur. But you trust your ability to respond intelligently. This trust does not make you reckless. It makes you grounded. You are cautious where caution matters and bold where boldness is required. You do not confuse impulse with intuition. You pause when necessary and act when ready. At this stage, ambition evolves. It becomes less about accumulation and more about contribution, not because accumulation is wrong, but because it loses its emotional charge. Money becomes a tool rather than a scorecard. You respect it without worshiping it. You also begin to see the subtle traps of comparison more clearly. You recognize how easily it distorts perception. You understand that everyone is playing a different game with different constraints. Comparison becomes less useful than reflection. Reflection becomes a regular practice. You review decisions without judgment. You ask what worked, what did not, and why. This practice sharpens judgment. It prevents repeated mistakes. It accelerates learning. Learning itself takes on a different quality. You no longer chase information compulsively. You learn with intention. You seek depth over breadth, application over accumulation. Knowledge becomes integrated rather than stored. This integration affects how you communicate. You speak more precisely. You listen more carefully. You are less interested in winning arguments and more interested in understanding perspectives. This does not mean you lack conviction. It means your conviction is informed rather than defensive. As a result, your relationships change. Some deepen, some fade. You become more selective, not out of arrogance, but out of clarity. You value honesty over harmony, mutual respect over convenience. Loneliness may still appear at times. Growth often creates distance. But this loneliness is different from isolation. It is accompanied by self-respect. You would rather be alone than misaligned. This choice strengthens integrity. Integrity becomes central now, not moral perfection, but consistency between inner standards and outer behavior. When integrity is present, decisions become simpler. You know what aligns and what does not. This clarity saves enormous energy. Energy, you realize, is more valuable than time. Time exists regardless. Energy determines how you experience it. Protecting your energy becomes a priority. You pay attention to what drains you and what replenishes you. Rest becomes intentional, not escapist. You rest to restore capacity, not to avoid responsibility. This distinction matters. Rest that avoids reality weakens you. Rest that supports engagement strengthens you. As you manage energy better, creativity increases. Ideas flow more easily. Solutions appear where problems once felt fixed. This is not because you are smarter, but because your mind is less cluttered. Clutter, both mental and physical, had been a silent burden. Letting go of excess creates space. Space allows focus. Focus allows excellence. Excellence, you now understand, is not perfection. It is care. It is doing ordinary things with uncommon attention. It is showing respect for your work, regardless of who is watching. When you act with care consistently, opportunities begin to respond. Not always immediately, not predictably, but gradually. People notice reliability. Systems reward consistency. Momentum builds. This momentum feels different from the frantic hustle you once believed was necessary. It is calmer, more controlled. It allows room for adjustment. It does not demand constant urgency. Urgency had once driven you, but it also exhausted you. Now, you choose urgency selectively. You know when speed matters and when patience produces better outcomes. Patience becomes a strategic advantage. In a world addicted to immediacy, those who can wait think more clearly. They avoid impulsive mistakes. They position themselves for compounding gains. Compounding is no longer an abstract concept. You see it in habits, relationships, skills, and finances. Small advantages, consistently applied, create disproportionate outcomes. This understanding shapes how you invest your time and attention. You stop looking for breakthroughs and start building foundations. Foundations are not exciting, but they are essential. Without them, growth collapses under pressure. Pressure will come. It always does. Life tests coherence. It challenges resolve. It exposes weaknesses. But pressure also reveals strength. It shows you who you have become. When pressure arrives now, you respond differently. You do not collapse into old patterns. You may struggle, but you do not abandon yourself. You stay present. You stay engaged. This is resilience. Not stoic indifference, but flexible endurance. The ability to absorb shock without losing direction. Direction matters more than speed now. You measure progress by alignment rather than comparison. You ask whether today's actions move you closer to the life you intend to live. This intention is not rigid. It evolves. You evolve. Goals adjust. Values deepen. The path remains dynamic. You no longer need certainty to move forward. You understand that certainty is rare and often illusory. You are comfortable operating with incomplete information. You trust process over prediction. Trusting process does not mean ignoring results. It means interpreting them wisely. You avoid emotional extremes. You neither inflate success nor catastrophize failure. This emotional regulation is one of the greatest benefits of the journey. Life becomes less dramatic, not less meaningful, but less chaotic. You experience depth without constant turbulence. You begin to see how rare this state is. How many people live driven by external pressure, internal conflict, or unexamined habit? This awareness does not make you superior. It makes you compassionate. Compassion replaces judgment. You recognize your former self in others. You understand how hard it is to question inherited narratives. You respect the courage it takes to change. If you offer guidance now, you do so gently. You know that no one can be forced awake. Insight arrives when it is ready. All you can do is live visibly aligned and let that speak. Your life becomes quieter evidence, not a performance, not a declaration, a demonstration. At the end of this journey, there is no dramatic conclusion, no final victory, no permanent arrival. There is simply a different way of being. You wake up. You act with intention. You learn continuously. You adjust honestly. You rest when needed. You build patiently. This is not the life you were promised. It is better because it is chosen.